can't believe I met Dan Brown. You're probably wondering how I got here with my first edition signed copy of The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. Let's rewind back to the beginning of this night. Okay, I'm so excited. Right now we're downtown Toronto and we're going to the Elgin Theatre to meet Dan Brown. He is doing his book tour for his new book, The Secret of Secrets. It's the 6th book in the Robert Langdon series. I'm not sure if I'll be able to take the camera inside to record anything, but I'm going to do a full recap, and we're also going to take a look at the signed book copy after. It took Dan Brown 6 years to write this book. He spent those 6 years studying neuroscience and taking notes regularly in order to piece together the mystery that we're going to uncover when we read The Secret of Secrets. I also just wanted to say that I'm going to share some tidbits after the conversation, and I'll be taking some notes, so I'll share any highlights or anything really cool that I hear. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Elena, and here I talk about lots of different books, but this time I'm talking about this book event that I went to. This is my first time going to a book launch tour event. I really had no idea what to expect. I think that normally events like this are held in the bookstore, but Dan Brown being Dan Brown, of course, they got an entire theater. Elgin Theatre is a really beautiful venue. I think I've been here to see a show in the past. I can't remember which one. It is one of the Mervish theaters, so they often use it for different plays, musicals, and other types of shows. So why do I care about Dan Brown? To me, Dan Brown isn't just the Da Vinci Code. When I was a teen, I was a big reader, and my parents had both read Angels and Demons and recommended it to me. I read it and loved it, and this was the first kind of grown-up book that I bonded with my parents over. I remember it felt so cool to be able to share a passion for books or a specific book with my parents. At that point, I was probably just reading a lot of Judy Blume, other coming-of-age books, and some YA fantasy. I was randomly on the Indigo app, and if you're not from Canada, Indigo is Canada's biggest bookstore chain. I saw information about this event, and there was a promo code for, I think, 50% off tickets. My husband happens to also be a big Dan Brown fan and read all of his books, so I figured this would be the perfect event for us to go to together. I bought these kind of last minute, maybe a week or two in advance, once I secured babysitters for the evening. So I assumed that there would be a lot of empty seats in the theater, but it was jam-packed. I'm sitting in my seat, the intro is finally starting, I'm so excited, and I start filming so I can see Dan Brown walk out, and then surprise, surprise.
Please welcome to the stage the father of best-selling author Dan Brown, Dick Brown.
Yeah, that's Dick Brown, Dan Brown's dad. My immediate reaction as a parent is, oh my goodness, he must be so proud of his son. I was even tearing up a little bit because I just feel like your kid never stops being your kid and you never stop being proud of their accomplishments. Dan Brown is 61 and he sold 250 million copies of his books. And then his dad comes out and he's doing this little intro and just talking about Dan's childhood and kind of how he grew up and what maybe shaped him into the person and writer that he is today. And he just seems just so proud. Dick Brown talked a lot about how he taught math, and Dan spent a lot of time on campus with him around international students and professors and really a very diverse environment. They never had a TV in the house, so he was forced to read, do puzzles, do lots of different activities, although Dan Brown did mention later on during the evening that he would go to his friend's house for Saturday morning cartoons. He mentioned that some of Dan's characters are named after teachers or friends, and it was funny when he clarified that the teachers typically don't have the best or luckiest fate in Dan Brown's books. He also shared something that I didn't know, which is that Dan Brown wrote his first book at age 5. It's called The Pig, the Giraffe, and the Pants on Fire. He dictated it to his mom, and his mom typed it out and printed it and bound it as a book. Anyway, Dick Brown was just so sweet, and he was so proud of his son. I love that his dad's on tour with him. He gets to introduce his son, and it seems like they're just having a nice time together. They also have this cute little moment when Dan Brown finally comes out on stage.
The most humble, down-to-earth, and altruistic guys you'll ever want to meet. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Brown.
I didn't really take videos of Dan Brown talking because I didn't want to be disruptive to the rest of the audience. I did take detailed notes though, so that I can share that with you. The event only lasted about 1 hour, and it was interview style with Johanna Schneller. She is a Canadian journalist and she writes for Globe and Mail. Johanna is very experienced and intelligent, and she did a great job, but I couldn't move past the fact that she looks and speaks like a boss that I used to have a few years ago that created a very toxic work environment that I really hated working with. Absolutely not Johanna's fault. It's definitely a me issue, but I just did not enjoy that part of the evening. Just to give you a brief synopsis of the new book, Secret of Secrets, so that the rest of this makes sense. The book is about Catherine Solomon. She is a noetic scientist, which means she specializes in human consciousness. She's Robert Langdon's love interest in this book after years of friendship. She actually is mentioned in one of the previous books as well, so they already have history. Robert Langdon and Catherine Solomon are both in Prague, and Catherine goes missing. Robert obviously goes on the search for her, and this search leads him through mysteries of Prague, of human consciousness, secret societies, and all that fun Dan Brown action. I've organized the main takeaways of what Dan Brown shared in a way that kind of makes sense, so starting with kind of his life and how he got to where he is today. He talked about his upbringing with his mom being religious and his dad being a mathematician. So spirituality and science always coexisted in his life. His mom also being a musician and Dan Brown himself playing piano nearly every day still. He was very familiar with symbols, such as the symbols in music and in math, having a significance. This is obviously evident in his writing with Robert Langdon as a Harvard professor of symbology. Dan Brown also shared that at Christmas, he didn't have presents under the tree. He had a note and he had to find his presents. So that's a pretty cute little family tidbit. He spoke a little bit about what led to him writing this book. After his last book was published 8 years ago, Origin, he lost his mom. That really made him start thinking about what happens to us after death. Is it really over, or is there something more? He started off this journey by thinking that it's all done after death. And now, 8 years later, after years of research and speaking with physicists, noetic scientists, doctors, he now believes that there could be something more. Specifically, he was mentioning people with near-death experiences. Some of these instances are medically documented. People who are gone and then come back and say what they saw and what they experienced. There are also medically documented cases of sudden savant syndrome, which is when somebody dies and then they come back, let's say, speaking another language fluently. In his research, he discovered lots of anomalies such as these ones that are really difficult to explain. Johanna asked an interesting question about Secret of Secrets regarding the driving force of the plot. She had mentioned that in the previous books, Robert Langdon really takes the lead and we're in his world of symbology. But in Secret of Secrets, it's very driven by the female protagonist. Although she is missing for a part of the book, Robert Langdon goes into her world, in the world of human consciousness, noetic science. And I really liked that. The book is set in Prague, which is the melting pot of mystical thinking. In this book, we really have the location as a character. An interesting point that was made is that the fear of death is something that we all share and is often a motivator for our actions, both good and bad. Most religions also talk about what happens after we die. Dan Brown talked a little bit about his writing process, which I personally really loved. Obviously, I am somebody who likes to create things as well, so although I'm not a writer, I am very interested in his process. A question came up of whether he knows where he's going with the story before he writes, or if he surprises himself as he's writing. That was a great question because I think sometimes you read a book and it seems like the author doesn't really know where they're going. But Dan Brown said that he always starts at the last chapter. He knows exactly how it's going to end. And then he works his way through the beginning and the journey to get to that ending. An interesting point that he made also was that when we read or watch James Bond, there's no question about whether James Bond is going to get the girl and defuse the bomb. We already know that's going to happen, but we're still curious about the journey to get there. Dan Brown also shared his multiple failures before getting to where he is today. He had published 3 books before he wrote the Da Vinci Code, and those 3 first books didn't sell very well. They weren't very popular. They didn't really find their audience. When he was publishing the Da Vinci Code, he actually didn't realize that it was controversial, and it really blew up. And in blowing up, he also found the audience for his first 3 books. When asked if he's bothered by haters, he had a very diplomatic response. He said, "People who share your interests are your fans, and people who don't share your interests are your critics." You may already know that there will be a Netflix adaptation of The Secret of Secrets. Dan Brown shared that the script is already done and he was really happy with it. He said it's really good, it's going to be great, and now the issue is casting. They're trying to cast younger. I think Robert Langdon for me will always be Tom Hanks. I actually started reading The Secret of Secrets and he now describes Robert Langdon as like chiseled and he's like all active and really athletic, and I just don't see it. But maybe as I move forward in the book, I can just kind of have an open mind and see this new and improved Robert Langdon as chiseled and fit. Not to say that Tom Hanks isn't those things. I would never speak poorly of Tom Hanks. He is just not who I picture in this new book. I feel like sometimes on-screen adaptations can be a hit or a miss, and I don't really want to be disappointed, but I think I will probably watch this show. Typically with a book like Dan Brown's, it's really hard to get all those details and all those plot points into a 2-hour movie. I think we have a much better chance of seeing an accurate representation of the book in an 8-hour Netflix limited series. Here's a little clip of Dan Brown finishing off the evening and going off stage. Obviously, this was an amazing experience. I loved the opportunity to be able to see Dan Brown in real life. The event lasted only 1 hour, which I think was a little bit disappointing for me, given that I had to get babysitters for the evening and it was over 1 hour for me to drive there. And when it finished at around 8 o'clock, we were like, okay, well, should we go home or should we stay out? We ended up going for drinks, which was nice because then we can kind of recap how we felt about the evening and what our main takeaways are. So that was actually nice. Oh, a cool thing that we learned is that Dan Brown has secret passageways in his house. I think he has 7 secret passageways. And when asked why he did that, he said it's kind of modeled after Scooby-Doo. Like there's nothing that much deeper. He just really loved Scooby-Doo. Since going to this event and looking up a lot of stuff about Dan Brown, my social media algorithm is showing me a lot of Dan Brown. I'm now feeling a little bit disappointed because everything I'm seeing on TikTok, YouTube, is the same stuff that he already shared at the event. So I feel like we didn't get anything new or exclusive. He just shares the same kind of fun facts every time. Also, I know that Indigo obviously hosted the event and they had the discounted tickets and all that, but Indigo had such a heavy presence at this event, which didn't really match the aesthetic of the theater, in my opinion. Indigo is very clean-cut, modern logo and all of that, and they were projecting their logo into the theater that is old with this beautiful architecture. It just didn't match at all. Okay, now the moment that we've all been waiting for, my signed first edition copy of The Secret of Secrets. There were 2 of us, so I got 2 of them. I almost feel bad opening it and reading it because I don't want to damage and like break the spine on a beautiful first edition signed copy. The moment of truth. The book event that we went to actually was a few days after the release. We had originally pre-ordered the book to get it as fast as possible. We ended up canceling the pre-order because we were going to get 2 signed copies, so we didn't need 3 books. We did, however, start listening to it on audio, and the narrator is really good, very expressive, but if you're somebody who pronounces the words why, what, when, you might be bothered by the narrator saying why, what, and when. It bothers me, and it's very distracting for me when I hear somebody pronounce things that way, even if it's a very talented narrator. I will definitely be switching over from audio to the physical copy now. Thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss the full review of Secret of Secrets coming soon.